few weeks ago, I'm reading Luke chapter 2, and Luke tells us that this was the first census that occurred while Quirinius was hegemon or governor of Syria. There are claims that Luke was wrong, that Quirinius was not governor until 6 AD, whereas Herod the Great died in 4 BC. I found this a bit odd because Luke is so careful about all of the dates and the names and the places and people that he gives, so I began to dig. And what I found was an interesting proposal by a scholar named Rhodes, who argued that Josephus was the one who actually made the mistake. Now, Josephus was a great historian, and he is an invaluable source of information about the ancient world. But he is not an infallible source. What I want to do for you is give you a Christmas present. I want to reconstruct the set of events that took place before, during, and slightly after the birth of Jesus. And in this reconstruction, we're going to get a lot of background information drawn from Josephus, drawn from Rhodes' reconstruction and from other sources that show what was happening in Judea and Jerusalem around the time of Jesus' birth. And it'll answer questions that we may have, like whatever happened to Herod after he ordered the slaughter of the babies in Bethlehem? How did he meet his end? Why would someone be driven to slaughter babies in the first place? In doing so, I hope to make your study of the scriptures this Christmas a little bit deeper and give us a little bit of insight into how Luke, in mentioning Quirinius tied to the census, was actually alluding to a much richer set of historical events that didn't make its way into his gospel. It's possible that I made mistakes in my reconstruction, but I want to give you a picture, a plausible story of how these two sets of events are actually one. And so I offer you a Christmas reconstruction.
Chaos theory.
Reality.
"40 years before the birth of Christ, on a lonely Galilean road, a man named Hezekiah the Sephardian walked alongside his young son Judas. For the Lord has given us what you see, the dust on your toes and the trees in the field," Hezekiah told his son. Like all Galileans, he spoke in a thickly accented Aramaic, the language of Babylonian and Persian conquest. "Our fathers forsook the law of the Lord, and so distress has fallen upon us." Hezekiah's distress were the Roman and Syrian troops that roamed Judea. Striving for liberation, Hezekiah and his men targeted the Gentile forces, stealing their supplies and overpowering their soldiers. To the rulers of Judea, he became a bandit chief that roamed Sepphoris, a city on a hill that could not be hidden. Thief they called him, but many held him in honor. "Call no man Lord, bow to no ruler but God." Judas nodded. He spun the sling in his hand as they walked. To liberate Israel from the nations was a dream that Hezekiah and his men would live and die for. Hezekiah's exploits captured the attention of an ambitious Idumean official named Herod. He tracked Hezekiah's movements through great difficulty. Though the people viewed Hezekiah as a hero, Herod viewed him as an opportunity. He captured Hezekiah and his men and executed them without trial or the prior approval of the king. Hezekiah fell as Judas watched. Judas the Galilean, son of Hezekiah the Sephardian, learned to hate the man called Herod. Herod grew in influence and power within Judea. An ethnic Edomite descended from Esau, he maintained a loose connection to Jewish culture. He claimed their God as his own, even as he worshipped Caesar and the power of Rome. Above all, he worshipped his own glory. Within a decade, he established himself as the unquestioned king of Judea through bribery, boldness, and shrewd political force. He married a Hasmonean descendant of the Maccabean kings to bolster his claim to the throne. She was one of 10 wives, which included 2 of his own nieces. He would eventually murder that princess under false accusations of treason and infidelity. The Talmud claimed he embalmed her body in honey for 7 years to satisfy his longing for her. Herod's desire to leave a name for himself drove him to construct massive building projects, for which he taxed his citizens heavily. He established the ancient marvel of Caesarea Maritima, an artificial harbor city adorned with baths, lavish buildings, and temples dedicated to the emperor and gods of Rome. He imposed a series of fortresses throughout the land of Judea, including Masada and Sepphoris, where he stored weapons and garrisoned soldiers. The fortresses were built as a defense, not from foreign threats, but from his own people. His greatest work was arguably rebuilding the temple of God in Jerusalem, which he thought would serve as an eternal memorial to his name. It was raised again to the heights of Solomon's temple in splendor, a glory of glories. Yet all the gold of Ophir couldn't conceal his inner poverty. The golden eagle he placed on the temple gate, a symbol of pagan Rome, described him equally well. Job's raptor that left bodies of the slain in his wake. Fearing insurrection and betrayal, he persecuted enemies, friends, and kin alike. He placed spies in every town, outlawed public gatherings, and tortured innocent men and women to extract false confessions. He enslaved wives and murdered 3 of his own sons. And Judas watched with patient disgust, now a man himself. He gathered a group of young men zealous for God's law and hateful of Herod's wickedness. Judas prepared their minds and bodies for the overthrow of Herod and Rome, or for the death that would follow any failed attempt. At this time, in 8 BC, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus to register the entire Roman world in a census. To count was to control, and to lay the groundwork for future taxation. Carrying out this census in Syria would be the first test for Varus, the new legatus pro praetore in Syria, and his duumvir counterpart, Publius Sulpicius Quirinius, Caesar's procurator in charge of tax assessment and external affairs. The pair had come to replace the former joint governors of Syria, with Varus taking over domestic concerns while Quirinius supplemented him as censor and military support. Quirinius hailed from Lanuvium near Rome, a Sabine enclave. His name derived from the Sabine god Quirinius, but he was known in Herod's court simply as Sabinus, referencing his ethnic identity. He rose to prominence following military victories against rebellious tribes in the desert and became consul in 12 BC, one of the highest ranks in Roman government. His appointment to Syria would assist Varus, who lacked military acumen, and help enforce the registration of Caesar's 4 million citizens. Herod bowed to Caesar's demands and opened his territory to Quirinius and his deputies. Quirinius pushed his way through Syria and Judea, lacking tact but compensating with power and obsession. In Judea, he met resistance in the form of Judas the Galilean and his zealots of the fourth philosophy, who did not recognize the authority of Caesar or his emissaries. Nor would they pay taxes in Roman coin, which bore graven images and blasphemous claims of Augustinian divinity. To comply would be to enslave themselves, Judas warned. Was it the house of David alone that suffered in his numbering? Are we to provoke God? They would not bow. Yet Quirinius would not relent. His pressure forced Judas to act. The zealots looked to Sepphoris, Judas's hometown, and the armory Herod had built within its fortress. They captured the armory, pillaged its treasures, and armed every man of their company in preparation for war. Galilee simmered with unrest. Herod seethed at this act of open rebellion. He became increasingly paranoid. Torture followed any whisper of sedition, whether real or imagined. Suspicion ensnared 2 of his sons, whom he accused of plotting to take his throne. He executed them without remorse. Then, in what seemed like an act of providence, Quirinius was called back to Antioch to dislodge a threat on Syria's northwestern border. He led the Legio XII Fulminata into Cilicia, leaving Varus with 3 legions and his deputy Coponius to continue the census work. Under their lighter hands, tensions eased. Judean voices emerged urging cooperation with the census. A man named Joazar persuaded the people against insurrection and the zealot philosophy of the Galileans. From Nazareth in Galilee, a man named Joseph and his betrothed Mary went up to Bethlehem to register for the census, being of the house and line of David. Arriving in Bethlehem, Mary gave birth to a son, Jesus, the prophesied Davidic king that would rescue the house of Jacob and free them from every captivity and turmoil. He would be called Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, and Emmanuel, God with us. The Holy Family began their life in Bethlehem and marveled at the words of God that came to them concerning their son. Magi journeyed from the east at the rising of a star, led toward Jerusalem to worship the one who was born King of the Jews. A king by birth, not by his own will nor by the works of his own cunning. The news of a newborn king greatly disturbed Herod and all those in Jerusalem. They knew what inevitably followed threats to Herod's power. Warned in a dream, Joseph fled to Egypt to escape the wrath of Herod. Failing to find the child in Bethlehem, Herod ordered all boys 2 years and younger to be slaughtered in the town and its vicinity. He who murdered his own sons to preserve his throne showed no mercy in slaying the sons of others. And so a voice was heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they were no more. As Herod's soul rebelled against God, his body rebelled against his soul. Fluids gushed from his innards, and worms emerged in gangrene below the belt. All pleasures of men were lost to him, and only his obsession for power remained. He could not stand, but issued murderous decrees from his reclining cushion. The butcher of Bethlehem accused Antipater, heir to his throne, of sedition and executed him. Word spread of Herod's declining health, and hope arose that his tyranny would soon end. As Herod's health faded and rumor outran truth, a mistaken report of his death had reached Judas and the zealot army months earlier. Encouraged by the high priest, they had moved in broad daylight against the temple and the graven eagle placed on its gate. The zealots of Judas cut the golden eagle with axes and proclaimed God's judgment against Herod. Unbeknownst to them, Herod was very much alive and sent his forces to counter the brazen attack on the temple gates. Judas and about 40 of his followers were captured. Herod took the attack personally, as an insult to his piety and what he viewed as his generous tribute to the God of Israel. It was an assault on his legacy and his name. The zealots refused to plead for their lives or apologize for destroying the Aquiline image, so they were burned alive in the sight of the people. Those sympathetic to them were forced to silence, lest they also be punished. And so there was no public mourning for Judas, Matthias the Zedek, or any of their company. Herod used this opportunity to depose the high priest and replace him with Joazar, a man more amenable to his will. Joazar continued to urge deference to Herod and submission to Caesar. Herod's final days were marked with turmoil. Continued cycles of sedition and repression crushed the people so that they longed for Herod's death. Fearing a celebration when he died, Herod ordered prominent men from every family be rounded up and placed in the hippodrome. He made his sister swear she would carry out his final command to have them executed when he passed, so that there would be mourning instead of joy at his death. His command was never carried out. Herod died, without love or remorse, in agony and decay. The people exhaled. His remaining family turned on each other to fight for succession to his throne. Shortly thereafter, the remaining zealots and the people approached Herod's heir apparent, Archelaus. They had two requests. First, that the heavy taxation they endured under Herod would be reduced, and second, that those responsible for the death of Judas, Matthias, and their followers face justice. Namely, they demanded the removal of Joazar the high priest, so that he could be replaced with one more agreeable to the law of Moses. Archelaus found their demands to be impertinent, coming at a time when the nation was supposed to be mourning his father's death. He asked them to wait until Caesar firmly established him as king, at which time he would consider their demands. Passover followed not many days later, and Galileans and those from other parts of Judea filled Jerusalem. Seditious words traveled through the streets and among the crowds making sacrifices. When Archelaus sent emissaries and soldiers to pacify the crowds, they rebuffed his men. They silenced them and refused to let them speak. At Passover, they turned on them with slings and stones. After murdering the soldiers, the crowds returned to offering their sacrifices. Archelaus ordered his forces to surround the rebels and slaughtered 3,000 of them within the temple. He canceled the Passover and ordered the crowds to disperse. Many did, but others refused. Archelaus headed to Caesarea, while Varus, principal governor of Syria, brought his legions into Jerusalem to quell the unrest. The leaders of the rebels were rounded up and punished, and for a time order was restored. Meanwhile, word came to Quirinius, who had been conducting a siege of attrition against the fortresses of the Montanez in Cilicia. Hearing of Herod's death and the tumult in Jerusalem, he made haste to Judea to take control of Herod's estate. He came upon Archelaus at Caesarea on his journey. Archelaus sent for Varus, who reluctantly left Judea, keeping a legion behind to maintain order. The three men conferred, and Varus implored Quirinius to keep out of Jerusalem, for fear that his presence might further inflame the crowds. Quirinius acquiesced and remained at Caesarea. However, as soon as Archelaus had sailed for Rome and Varus had returned to Antioch, Quirinius continued to Jerusalem and took control of the legion Varus had left behind. He seized Herod's palaces and belongings by force. His thirst for Herod's wealth drove him to crush any that opposed his work. Anger churned among the people. 49 days after Passover, at Pentecost, Jerusalem was again filled with pilgrims from Galilee, Jericho, and all parts of Judea. Their anger burst. The crowds rose in revolt against Quirinius and besieged him and his soldiers in the palace. They dug holes under the palace walls and fought to gain access to the Sabine and his men. This was their chance to regain their ancient liberty and end the tyranny that had plagued their lands for decades. Quirinius desperately dispatched a message to Varus, who brought down the 2 remaining legions from Syria to crush the uprising. He stormed the zealot stronghold of Sepphoris in Galilee on his way to Jerusalem and burned the city to the ground, making its inhabitants slaves. On reaching Jerusalem, the rebel forces met their end under Varus's legions. Freed from the siege, Quirinius escaped. Ashamed to face Varus, he fled back to Caesarea privately. Varus's judgment against the captured was severe. He ordered the crucifixion of 2,000 for their part in the revolt. Word of Herod's death had also reached Joseph in Egypt, who was told in a dream that the king who sought to kill Jesus had died. Joseph, Mary, and Jesus set out on their long-awaited return journey to Judea and Bethlehem. As they neared Jerusalem, they heard stories. They encountered those who had fled from the massacres and the tumult in and around Jerusalem. Hearing that Archelaus was reigning in the place of his father Herod, Joseph decided to return to his hometown of Nazareth in Galilee. On the road passing Jerusalem, they saw those condemned to die by Varus, accursed as criminals nailed to wood, hanging on their right and on their left. The boy Jesus, now a toddler, saw them too. His small stomach turned at the disfigurement and torture hung before him on crosses. He knew his own road would one day run also through Jerusalem, with bandit zealots hanging on his right and on his left.
Theos theory.